Hello, I am a woman in my late 50s. When I was young, I lost my parents early and grew up at my aunt's house. Even though my uncle died and my aunt became single, she took me in. That was when I was in the second grade of elementary school. My aunt ran a boarding house near our university, so the house was always crowded with college students. I helped my aunt by making food and cleaning the house for the boarders. My aunt wasn't kind and sweet, but she was a quiet, persevering person who did her job. She didn't even treat me kindly, but she did everything for me. When I entered middle school and had my first parent meeting, my aunt was very busy with the boarding house construction. My aunt didn't treat me badly, but I was self-conscious a lot on my own, so I didn't tell her about the school interview. On the morning of the interview day, I said goodbye as usual and went to school. But unexpectedly during lunchtime, I was called to the teacher's office. I went and saw my aunt was there. In a dazed state, I went to the counseling room with my aunt and had an interview with the homeroom teacher. I went home after school to self-study that day. My aunt had prepared dinner and was waiting for me. Hi, me. You can't tell me everything when your school asks mom to come to school. I'm sorry that I still make you feel uncomfortable, and we've already lived together for several years, so it would be nice if we could live as a mother and daughter. When she said this, tears started pouring out. In the meantime, I couldn't even call her a mother, but I was ashamed to say that she was my aunt. I never said it properly because my friends would point fingers at me if they knew I had no parents. Somehow, when my friends saw me and my aunt together, they would ask me if she was my mother. I just nodded cautiously. Was it because these sorrows came all at once? She put my favorite stir-fried chicken side dish in front of me, but I couldn't eat it and cried out loud in my aunt's arms. Originally, my personality is not that friendly. I guess that's why I made it hard for you. I hope you treat me a little more comfortably now. Thank you. I'll do better. I wanted to call you Mom too, but I was so sorry. I've been living thinking that you're going to be my daughter from the day you came to my house. Do I have any children? Because I have no intention of remarrying, now feel free to call me Mom. From then on, I called my aunt Mom. I naturally introduced her as my mother to my friends. I even brought my friends to the boarding house. My school life was much brighter than before. The best thing about staying at home was that I could learn from my older sisters and brother. My older brothers went to college, and even if I didn't ask for special instruction, they would sit next to me and teach me things when I struggled with my homework. Thanks to their help, I learned how to study effectively, and my grades improved significantly. In high school, I heard about how my siblings who attended good universities studied, and I applied their methods to my own life, creating a study plan that allowed me to focus better and not waste time. As a result, my grades continued to improve, and I even received a scholarship to the university of my choice. My mother was so proud that she threw a party for the whole neighborhood, even handing out fruits and cakes to passersby in front of our house. At that time, I already considered my aunt as my mother, and she was overjoyed to see me succeed. However, I was a bit embarrassed by all the attention. Despite this, I enjoyed my college life, participating in various club activities and earning pocket money through part-time tutoring. I also gave my mother many presents as a way to show my gratitude. Strangely, my relationships with men never lasted long. Whenever things started to get serious, I would get scared and push them away. Perhaps it was because I was young, but it could also be due to the fact that I was adopted by my aunt and didn't have real parents, which may have caused some insecurities. I would worry about what would happen if we talked about marriage and if any family would accept me. However, after graduating from college, I met a man while working and fell deeply in love with him. He approached me first and asked me out, saying that he thought our personalities were a good match. I agreed to go out with him and was pleasantly surprised by how kind and fun he was. He made me feel comfortable, and I didn't have to worry about my past or my insecurities. Accommodate me. I also liked the fact that he was different from the guys I met in college. After that, I met him a few more times, and as we talked, we naturally started talking about the family. He didn't care too much about the fact that my parents died early, and I grew up with my aunt, In life, things like this can happen. It's not your fault, so don't be intimidated. I appreciated it when he comforted me like that. That was the main reason I fell for him. My boyfriend and I dated for about a year, and eventually we decided to get married. When I told my mom that I was getting married, she burst into tears. Even if I die, I will still be able to see your parents. Since you didn't talk about marriage, I wondered if you didn't have a heart. I couldn't even ask you. Why not? The fact that you raised me this much. My mom and dad must thank you 100 times. I haven't been able to say it for a while. I wanted to say it when it was definite. I'm sorry. Why should you be sorry? Well done. Just live well in the future, and that's it. I'm proud of you, Jamie. She was more moved than when I got accepted into college. My in-laws had a sister-in-law who was married, and my mother-in-law. My fiancé's father passed away 2 years ago. His father was an executive at a large corporation and had quite a lot of money saved up. I heard that his family was quite well off. I saw that they were well off when I went to meet his family for the first time to say hello. You won't be uncomfortable when you come to my house. Nathan's sister lives in Canada, so you won't see her often. And since I'm the only one, you just need to get along with me. My mother-in-law said you just need to do well. She said it again and again. She didn't seem warm, but I didn't mind her noble and dignified ways. We prepared for the wedding smoothly and held the ceremony a few months later. When I went to say hello for the first time after my honeymoon, my mother-in-law welcomed us. She even prepared dinner herself. My husband and I enjoyed the meal prepared by my mother-in-law. Then my mother-in-law said to me, "From now on, you have to do this. Since you have boarders at your house, you must have done a lot of kitchen work. I'm doing it especially for today." "Yes, Mother. Of course I have to do it. We're not running a boarding house now. Still, I helped my mother a lot in the past. But you and your mom don't look alike. Do you resemble your late father?" That said, I was very flustered. My husband said that he would take care of talking about my family ahead of time, so I thought they knew everything. But he didn't say anything. My husband only then noticed his mother. "Mom, that's actually Jamie's. Jamie's parents died early, and now my mother-in-law is her aunt." But my mother-in-law looked at me and her eyes seemed to grow cold. At the time, I thought it was my delusion, but the next weekend, she immediately called me to the in-laws, and my mother-in-law sat me down. She was making an issue about that for over an hour. "Even if I didn't like you because you were the daughter of a boarding house, I should have believed you because Nathan liked you. But how can you fool people like this? If you said you were an orphan without parents, then I somehow stopped this marriage." "No, Mother, I thought you knew everything, because he told me he would tell you. I never meant to hide it. I don't want to hear it. Do you know what kind of person your late father-in-law was?" "He was the CEO of a very large company. He was someone you wouldn't dare look at. You must have thought it was easy, that we are a family without male elders. I'll show you that I'm not easygoing." While jumping up and down, she didn't even try to listen to me. I had to work all day, cleaning my in-laws' house, doing the laundry, and cooking in the kitchen. When I got home, I asked my husband why he didn't tell his mother about me. I really wanted to say it, but I didn't have any time. I didn't lie on purpose, so what's the problem? You know, she thinks that I did that on purpose. And what do you mean you didn't have any time to tell her? Is this something you can't talk about by taking just a brief time out? But when I thought about it, I realized it was my responsibility for not telling her directly, and I let it pass. However, my mother-in-law spread rumors here and there that I tricked her, and she called me almost every day and made me do things terribly. She would order me to dip the rag in harsh detergent and even ask me to wash the entire floor and pillars in the house. I wanted to go back to my mom's house several times, but every time my mother's face made me stop. My mother, who said she would stand up to my biological parents, who had just passed away, would think how hard it would be for her if I returned with only a few months of marriage. Then I was able to endure it no matter how painful it was. And I also tried to understand my mother-in-law. She must have wanted to see a daughter-in-law from a good family, but she may regret that she allowed our marriage. But when it was so difficult, my husband was assigned overseas 4 months after we got married. He said he had to leave for 2 years. But my mother-in-law said I could never go with him. You're gonna go abroad and live while spending my son's money without me? I can't see that. Wait here, it's only 2 years. Can't you do that too? My husband convinced me. First of all, I will go first. And in the meantime, while you're courting my mother, say something so you can get out. If you do well, my mother will change her mind. What if I still can't go? Do you want me to live here alone? You know how your mother treats me. But I couldn't break the stubbornness of my mother-in-law, who insisted she would die without drinking water if I left. In the end, I decided to follow my husband's advice and stay. I wanted to make my mother-in-law feel better and try to be nicer than before. However, my mother-in-law's behavior only worsened. She even stopped me from using my credit card and monitored my spending. When I returned home, my tears wouldn't stop, and before I knew it, 6 months had passed. I heard from my husband's colleague that he would be coming back for a while. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. I wondered how he managed to contact his mother. My mother-in-law told me that her son was coming. I knew this was true when I overheard her bragging on the phone to her friends, but I couldn't reach my husband. I decided to go to the airport and surprise him. As he came out of the immigration gate, I froze. He was with another woman, and my mother-in-law greeted them both. My husband and mother-in-law deliberately avoided me. I couldn't take it anymore and went to a lawyer's office to arrange a divorce. But there I discovered something even more shocking. My husband and I had never registered our marriage. My mother-in-law had convinced my husband to delay the registration, just in case. She even considered taking me in as her daughter-in-law, even though it wasn't my parents' business. When I returned to my mother's house, my husband and mother-in-law didn't come looking for me. And when I went to retrieve my belongings, I coincidentally ran into my sister-in-law, who was meeting with my husband and the other woman. It was then that I realized I had been nothing more than a maid in their house for almost a year. Any feelings of sympathy I had for my husband were gone. My mother didn't say anything to me and treated me the same as before, with her usual expressionless demeanor. I thought she was just ignoring the situation. One day, I came home upset after drinking and heard my mother crying in her bedroom. I went to comfort her, and she asked me what we should do about my situation. She regretted sending me off to a family without properly checking them first. She cried and it woke me up. I went back to my room, pulled the blanket over myself, and cried. I knew I couldn't stay like this. At that time, my mother was no longer running the boarding house and had rented out the second floor. However, the tenant was about to move out. Taking the opportunity, I asked my mom to build a building instead. My mother checked around and she judged that it was a better option, so she said yes. I used my connections from my former company to find builders and interior contractors. We built a building for a decent price. Our house, which had a large front yard and backyard, turned out to be wider than expected. We gave 3 shops on the first floor and rented out the second and third floors to private houses. We lived on the 4th floor. My mom and I thought this would be okay. My mother also asked to build a house on her country land, which was left behind when her father died. I started designing it right away, and the construction progressed smoothly. Before it was even finished, someone showed up to buy the building, and we were able to sell it for a good price. With the profit from that, I bought an old house in the metropolitan area, built a building, and sold it again. In that way, I built several buildings in the metropolitan area and sold them. Some buildings were even rented out. As a result, our wealth grew rapidly. We had become quite successful in the real estate industry before we knew it. Of course, I had to pay a lot of taxes and had a lot of things to take care of, but I was able to handle everything. Then I heard that old townhouses near the university were for sale. My mom and I immediately went to see what the building was like. I went to the nearby real estate to find out the market price. I looked around for a few days and saw that a lot of students passed by, and it was not far from the school. I concluded that it would be a good idea to build a studio and rent it out, so I made an appointment to meet the landlord through a broker. First of all, I said I would see it first and went to the meeting place, but an old woman with a familiar face was sitting alone. As I approached her, I was so surprised the moment I saw her face. I exclaimed, "Oh, what a surprise!" She said she was surprised by my voice, and the grandmother looked at me and was also surprised. That grandmother was none other than my former mother-in-law. My ex-mother-in-law was not the noble and dignified figure she used to be. She had lost a lot of weight and looked haggard and somewhat shabby. "How are you? Are you really the one who said you would buy the building?" Then her eyes trembled. I couldn't stay in front of her because I remembered what had happened in the past. I said I would call back later and left in a hurry. My mother found out about it and she was very surprised. How could such a thing happen? It's not like enemies meet on a single wooden bridge. We have nothing to do with those buildings. Let's not do it. We don't need it now. She called the broker right away. Right away. She said she would give up the townhouse. That night I suffered from nightmares of mopping all day at my in-laws' house. The next day, my mom and I left the house to check out the other buildings. Someone stood in front of the house and immediately blocked our way. It was my ex-mother-in-law. She said, "It's been a long time. You seem to be doing well. You look great. Shall we go somewhere and talk for a minute?" I replied, "Why should we? We're strangers now, aren't we? Whoever hears will misunderstand." She insisted, "It's okay. Please come back." Then my ex-mother-in-law grabbed my mother's hand and said, "It will only take a minute. I won't take up much of your time. Let's talk here." My mother tried to resist, but my ex-mother-in-law grabbed her clothes and said, "You said you wouldn't buy our townhouse. What's wrong with it? If the selling price is high, I can match it. You wouldn't assume that it wouldn't be such a problem. We don't buy them no matter how good the price. Look, it was only in the past that we had misunderstandings, like this and that, but it's already over, isn't it? It was a long time ago, but let's not dwell on it. It would be nice to separate private and public affairs." I was getting angry and shouted, "Stop it! What's wrong with you?" My ex-mother-in-law just laughed and said, "Keep your voice down and speak. You too must be embarrassed. You're somewhat responsible for that. You didn't even talk about your family honestly. For not allowing me to register my marriage with your son was before you knew my parents were dead. How would you explain that? Shame on the town? What am I ashamed of? Even if it's embarrassing, you'd be ashamed. Who are you to tell my mom not to be mean about the past? Private or public? Do you think that all words are just words?" I was so upset that I could feel my heart racing. My mom held me and calmed me down. She said, "We have nothing to misunderstand and we never did. You can't tell the difference between public and private, and you don't seem to be able to judge reality right now. We don't need that house. We have no problem making a living, so please understand and go home." My ex-mother-in-law put her hands together, almost as if begging, and said, "I really regret that. I also felt very bad after she left, so please think about it one more time." "Please?" I replied, "I really need to sell this right now. Hey, Jamie, baby, I'm sorry for what happened in the past. I was stupid. Let's stop being angry and forget everything. It was me who was stupid. I trusted your stupid son who couldn't convince his mother to marry him. Now, you and I have nothing to do with it, so don't hold on to it any longer." As I tried to shake it off and pass by, the mother-in-law knelt and begged, "I'm so sorry, darling. Please, aren't you embarrassed to be calling Jamie your darling? If you keep doing this, I'll call the cops. Will you go on your own, or will you be forced to go?" Then my ex-mother-in-law got up to leave. It turns out that my ex-husband fell for a woman he met abroad and became addicted to gambling. Eventually, he lost money and was kicked out after rumors spread at the company. The woman returned the title to the apartment where I lived with my ex-husband and took the money from him by filing for divorce. And yet my ex-husband still went around the gambling tables. As a result, my mother-in-law lost her home. She sold a lot of land and tried to dispose of her townhouse, which was the last one she had left. It seemed like she needed to dispose of it quickly. We didn't want to buy the house, and she ended up selling it to someone else for a much cheaper price than what she tried to sell it to us for. Since then, I hadn't heard from my mother-in-law or ex-husband. A few years after that, I met a person who was in the trade business through an introduction. I ended up remarrying after some time, and I also had a beautiful daughter. Maybe she looks prettier because she was born when I was older. To this day, we are living happily with my mother. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope everyone is happy and healthy. Please share and write your words of wisdom in the comment section. Liking and subscribing would be a big help to me. Take care.